May 1st, Unified Year 1927. ILDOA, General GASSMAN'S office. When he walked into General GASSMAN'S office, the general himself stood to merrily welcome, or at least he wore a mask to that effect, the mere colonel.
Colonel von Lergen, welcome to ILDOA.
You must be exhausted after such a long trip. Please make yourself comfortable. The man's amiable demeanor brimmed with affable warmth. Someone who didn't know better might have shed tears in response to this mask. It's hard not to be touched by such kindness coming from a general. That said, the expression plastered on Colonel von Lergen's face was also a mask. His words of gratitude, implying he was terribly moved, were practically a type of formal beauty. I thank our beloved ally for their hospitality. Well, we've been neighbors for so long. We should help each other out when we're in trouble. He offered a fine cigar made in the South. Care for one? Even in the Reich's capital, these had become scarce. The ostentatious recommendation of a smoke made it impossible to not grasp the general's implication. Though Lergen smiled and thanked him, he had mixed feelings. When we're in trouble, yes, you're quite right. No need to be so stiff. I'd appreciate it if you didn't pay so much attention to our rank discrepancy. After all, our countries are friends. I'd like to be as direct as we can. Very well. Lergen took advantage of that sentiment as he began to speak. I'll get straight to the point. Regarding your mediation of a compromise. Let's hear it. Nodding and smoking, the men continued their conversation. Allow me to be frank. The Imperial Army seems to be having a hard time in the East. We'd like to help you in some way. The Southern Continent Expeditionary Army Corps is so grateful for your generous assistance with supplies. Oh, right. There's that, isn't there? I hear from the men in the field that there tend to be delays. Not everything can go perfectly. I hope you'll understand. Even if we have a duty to our ally, ILDOA has its own issues as well. I realize that. So, you can take that into consideration for me? Yes. Lergen nodded at the general. It was a bit difficult to tell what he was thinking. His gaze somewhat dubiously urged the general on. Well, it surely went both ways. Lergen yearned to know how GASSMAN and ILDOA felt about everything, too. To be honest, the Southern Continent Expeditionary Army Corps is considering pulling out. If necessary for negotiations, that is. Oh, that's promising news. GASSMAN nodded with interest, but then proceeded to cut to the chase, with the same smile on his face. But, Colonel von Lergen, you seem to be misunderstanding something. Misunderstanding? I don't know about that. When Lergen feigned ignorance, GASSMAN rained criticism on him, still smiling. Who should the Empire really be talking to first? You're currently fighting major battles, what about recovering peace there? That seems to be the most pressing matter to me. You're requesting negotiations while at the same time suggesting we should first negotiate with the party that's attacking us? You'll have to excuse me, but I don't quite understand how the Kingdom of ILDOA does things. Well, the Federation's violent handling of the situation has its logic. But, he continued, looking tired, I'm sure you know everything has a cause. Even if they were aware of them, the Empire couldn't accept the current situation. That was why Lergen the messenger had to play his part according to the script. General, please forgive this question, but what kind of logic do you mean?
A small sigh.
GASSMAN shook his head and spoke. The provisional discussion plan your country proposed. Even for a starting place, honestly, it's too greedy. Speaking objectively as a mediator, it brings your willingness to negotiate into question. Listen, he continued, sounding somewhat exhausted, the Federation wants an unconditional ceasefire with zero reparations or cessation. That's expecting an awful lot. Lergen snorted. As the one in charge of negotiations, conveying that they would never swallow such outrageous terms was as good as his duty. Which was why he, a colonel, had to take such an attitude toward a general. Under normal circumstances, he wouldn't get off with merely breaking out in a cold sweat, but it must have been permitted here due to the mutual tacit understanding that this was simply how it would go. Well, that's quite, something. And in response, the Empire proposes a ceasefire that demands reparations, makes requests involving territory, and even assumes local referendums have been held in occupied areas. Seeing as the Empire is the victim here, those seem like modest requests to me. I understand your position, suffering as you have such terrible losses. But your requests strike me as much more avaricious than simple compensation would warrant. No matter what anyone said, surely the necessity of security was ample justification. Lurchin's strict orders from the home country were to secure a safe space. The general staff was close to pleading for a safe zone, even if territorial gains were kept to a minimum. With the state's security hanging in the balance, Lurchin had no choice but to ignore his rank and butt heads on the matter. With all due respect, General, please just laugh about it. Oh, so you have some self-awareness. Please remember that I'm forced to say what we demand. This isn't my personal opinion, but strict orders from the home country.
Phew.
The bitter look on the general's face as he sighed was a good indication of how rough this was going to be. So not open negotiation, but a working-level meeting. I'd sure like to reach an understanding. But isn't that inflexible attitude of the Empires the reason the Federation is attacking? What an utterly two-faced thing to say. Leave the bait-and-switch offers of negotiation that end in attacks to the ancient barbarians.
Fine.
I understand well what the Empire is saying. As its ally, we'll take proper measures. Thank you ever so much for your consideration. Please do as you see fit. Both Gassman with his leave it to me, and Lurchin bowing a thank you understood the exchange, and the wordplay was recognized as negotiation to find a common ground. To Lurchin, representing the Empire the party under fire, it was undeniable that the pushback he currently faced was weakening his position. On his way back to the Imperial Embassy after respectfully leaving General Gassman's office, he abruptly looked to the sky and wished for the troops to be victorious. Please win. How much better he would have felt if he could have stayed on the Eastern Front and led the Lurchin Kampfgruppe himself. It was unbearable to only be able to hope. Humph. A Kampfgruppe commander who remains only in name is a pitiful wretch indeed. All he could do was believe in the troops in the field and the friends he had left there. May 1st, Unified Year 1927, Imperial Capital BERUN. In the war room, where the air was thick with the purple smoke of cigars and cigarettes, and fortresses of stubs were being constructed in the ashtrays, Lieutenant General von Rudersdorf, sitting at the head of the table, spoke to request a report. What's the general status on the Eastern Front? His voice wasn't loud by any means, but it carried. The reply came from a part of the mechanism, the precision war machine, known as a staff officer. We've halted the enemy's general offensive. The front lines are hanging together by a thread. The expression on the operations officer's face was pleased. Nice work, says Rudersdorf with a glance at his friend sitting next to him. How's the mobilization and supply stockpiling coming? Not great. Since the forward depot has been demolished, the planned reorganization has to be put off for a little while. As a result of pulling the front line quite a ways back, the forward depot that had been built under the assumption there would be an advance was utterly demolished. Over the course of the winter and into spring, most of the supplies they had diligently stockpiled were burned. Perhaps the fact that they had destroyed most things before the enemies could get their hands on them was the one silver lining? But if that was the silver lining, it was clear how bad things were. The air fleet is solidly operational. We withstood the enemy's attempt to cripple the Air Force and just barely managed to secure air superiority in all sectors. Good. Zetter nodded, though he had a few questions. Assume the enemy air units could have reinforcements and keep working to maintain control of the skies. We've been handling requests for planes and personnel as they come up, correct? Yes, General.
About that.
The 2 reconnaissance units you urgently deployed are up and running. We're now capable of performing tactical reconnaissance all along the Eastern Front. So we made it just in time. It was mostly the operations men who sighed in relief. Their manager, Rudersdorf, especially, looked delighted, his face cracking into a smile. The recon net we carefully built was paralyzed so easily, we couldn't be sure about the enemy's intentions. You really saved us, Zetter. Hearing you say that makes it worth the struggle of scraping them together. So, I realize you haven't analyzed the materials yet, but how do you interpret the enemy's offensive? It's extremely awful, but just shy of lethal. Ultimately, the Empire's forces had been hit at a bad time. That was the undeniable truth. The Eastern Front and the Southern Front are both a bit worrisome. Oh right. Zetor seemed to remember something and asked his old friend a question. How's the diplomacy going? What does the negotiation team have to say? According to our man on the ground, they've still only held some preliminary discussions. He reported that both sides said what they had to say and that the issues are more serious than simply finding common ground. So Lurgen's saying it won't be so easy to get their support. He never thought it was something that could be accomplished overnight, but the fact that the EMP was facing an enemy offensive while the negotiations were still underway was another example of bad timing. What do you make of the Federation Army increasing military activity under these circumstances? I'm sure they're priming us and figuring it makes a good bargaining chip. They seem to want to make us realize how weak we are, Zetor murmured bitterly. If the Imperial Army concentrated on the Eastern Front too much, ILDOA could start to stir on the southern border. Looking at the big picture, it was a classic feint. You mean if we get too involved in the East, ILDOA will be jumping for our throats? No one can rule that out 100%. We have no choice but to be frightened of these nightmare scenarios. Can you say any different, General von Rudersdorf? But it makes me wonder if that's what they're actually after. Rudersdorf was still going around in the same loops of doubt and worry. They had been through this debate several times before. It might be a feint, or it could be the main attack disguised as a feint, or possibly both of those things. The Federation had a talent for this sort of negotiation and pressure. Maybe this was a ploy to get secret negotiations to go to their advantage. Or it was possible that the diplomacy was a ruse and they were planning a huge offensive. Vexingly, each hypothesis had its logic and was probable enough. I understand that. We're facing a military dilemma. Smoking his cigar, Zetor confessed his true feelings in a sober voice. If we hit them back, we'll get drawn in further. But if we continue retreating, we'll lose our foothold. On top of that, he continued with gravity, I must admit we don't know the enemy's intentions or capability due to lack of intel, so we're ill-equipped to deal with them. We thought several times that we had wiped out the Federation field army. However, the truth is a shock. The size of the enemy's reserve forces is nothing short of dizzying. Staff officers, especially, understand that sinking feeling of having failed to evaluate a situation correctly. And being unable to get an accurate grasp on the enemy's strength is a veritable nightmare. The Federation Army doesn't have the ability to start a major battle, not right now. That analysis of the situation turned out to be gravely mistaken. Of course, he took care to add, the enemy must also be trying too hard. Without a serious balancing act and creative accounting, it would be impossible to mobilize so many troops. But one thing we can say is that if they have so many forces, they're more flexible about taking losses than we are. It makes you aggravatingly envious, doesn't it? How can you talk about it as if it doesn't concern you? Oh, it does. On the contrary, I consider it urgently every day. I'm not sure you can talk, as someone's so good at scraping people together. Zetor grumbled a response to Rudersdorf with a shrug. I'd like you to remember that Service Corps isn't just another way to say alchemists. I can try all I like, but I won't be able to provide the infinite resources we need from a finite stock. Humph. Rudersdorf snorted and, with his cigar between his teeth, asked in a strained voice, So you mean logistical limitations will hold us back? Regretfully, that is correct. So what, then? Are you saying we should retreat? Even with Rudersdorf glaring at him, Zetor had to give the same answer. I can't deny it. The only way to fix the Eastern Front at this point is to assume a long haul and reorganize the lines while putting up a delaying defense. I won't say we have to fall back dramatically, but if we can to whatever point is doable, the logistical burden will lighten proportionally. And then, if we buy time, at least we'll make it through this crisis. If we can stabilize the lines, we can probably have enough time to come up with a solution. There is no other way. It was a cliché way of putting it, but to Zetor, it was also his sincere understanding of their situation. You've gotten awfully rusty, haven't you? Huh. That's why he froze at his friend's remark. Do you have some other brilliant idea? War is solved not with hesitation, but with a strong will. Blooming late is an armchair theory. We need to get our way and put the enemy in a hard spot through decisive action, even if it's quick and dirty. You want to punch some more glass? Let's not. I'm not a fan of putting an extra burden on wartime production. This again? Rudersdorf sighed and turned to his friend with a stern look. You're being stingy during a war, Zetor? Please amend that to say that I'm aware that the amount in my wallet is limited. All you have to do is ask. I'm the one who has to conjure things up. There are physical constraints to what we can mobilize. We don't have a genie's lamp here, you know. If it's bankruptcy or defeat, I think bankruptcy is the better option. Rudersdorf snorted. His unsentimental view was the correct one for an operations man. If you went out into the country, probably everyone felt that bankruptcy was fine. But Zetor cocked his head. I wonder. We've already run through the country's assets. Even if the war ends, what will have become of us? Yes, I'm sure that's an issue. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Even if it's something to worry about, now is not the time. We'll worry about it once we're able to end the war. Are you saying we should concern ourselves with finances while fighting? He laughed at the absurdity. That's not our job, Zetor. Our duty is to win. We can't use the budget as an excuse for defeat. It was a valid, cool-headed understanding of their situation. As a soldier, he couldn't deny it. But for Zetor, it was equally difficult to agree. To that end, I've got a bit of a gamble to make. A gamble? Now, while the enemy is on the move, is a once-in-a-million chance. You mean a large-scale invasion of Federation territory? That's right, said Rudersdorf, and Zetor understood immediately. This was one of Rudersdorf's typical plans to solve things with his fists. If it goes well, great. But what if it fails? Hold on, are you insane? The enemy has left its nest. Well, our lines are in a sad state, true, but if we rebuild them, it's a great opportunity to encircle and annihilate. With a fierce grin that seemed to proclaim that their chance had arrived, Rudersdorf looked every bit the valiant general a model operations man should be, that mass of fighting spirit. If we can do a good job, we should be able to push the lines up. It'll be a sort of pursuit battle. If it goes better than Open Sesame did. Don't be ridiculous, Zetor said with his dissenting eyes. Enveloping the Republican army on the Rhine front with their revolving door took an awful lot of preparation. The idea that if they worked extra hard, logistics and intel would be solid sounded like something out of an old folktale. We're not on the Rhine anymore. It has to be done. It's too great a risk. You're saying we should put everything we've got on the table right now? Just load all our eggs into one basket. Why don't you? Beggars can't be choosers. Well, that's probably an accurate way to express it. I see. So the Imperial Army is slipping into poverty. Even so, Zetor had to argue back. The best way to avoid a gradual decline is to plunge straight to the bottom. Being risk-averse is healthy. But consider this, my friend. You can't call standing by and watching things get worse good risk analysis. What we need is action. Action that is as drastic as possible. You can talk about it all you like, but an operation like that is impossible. Why? I'll give you the short answer. Zetor spat. The supply network won't be able to hold out. Force it. Tell that to an alchemist or a wizard. Zetor was pointing out with a grimace that it wasn't his job. As the person scraping the bottom of the barrel to make ends meet and just barely keeping the Eastern Front from falling apart, he had an objection or two. Frankly, the Empire was nearing the limits of its national strength. They had surpassed the acceptable number of losses in the East ages ago, and the personnel shortage in the Imperial Army was growing increasingly severe. They had drafted the young, plus recruiting the elderly and women to work as reserves, and they even had the prisoners of war laboring.
It still wouldn't be enough.
I just don't think we should move. That would use up the last of our dwindling energy. No, Zetor, it's the opposite. We need to act while we still have the energy. Above all, the Federation Army has started a maneuver battle. But why does that mean we have to respond in kind? The enemy has left its base. You could say we've lured them out of their cave. You're the one who sowed the seeds, Zetor. You've got to reap what you sow, and it's harvest time. Wait, were you saying I did? Zetor asked, puzzled, and Rudersdorf replied in exasperation. You're the one who sowed the dream of self-determination among the people in the East. They're trying to make an anti-Federation flower bloom in the occupied territories, so now's the time to take out the main forces. Zetor could only mumble and then ph in response, so Rudersdorf continued with growing intensity. The Federation can't hold out. Just as the imperial family of Russie crumbled, so too will the Federation's Communist Party scatter like rats. Show me the evidence that supports this. Are you sure it's not just wishful thinking? History testifies. I'm gonna pass on lending my ear to that jerk. As far as I know, history's the worst kind of liar. Ha ha ha, laughed Rudersdorf as he shrugged at Zetor's remark. That's a good point. But if fate or what have you is really so fickle, perhaps it can be grasped with an iron fist. That sounds like something you'd do. That goes for the both of us. Anyhow, first we need to tighten up the lines. If possible, we'll counterattack. Make the arrangements. May 1st, Unified Year 1927, Eastern Front, Salamander Kampfgruppe Headquarters. To someone who just arrived from the south, even spring on the Eastern Front must feel cold. Regardless of how well he may have wanted to present himself, the colonel appears somewhat warmly dressed. I suppose the fact that he came prepared with cold weather gear means his research of the battlefield is laudable. Either way, the social animal Tanya takes care not to forget social norms, a warm smile, a polite demeanor, and a sharp, soldierly salute. The colonel, who returns her salute as he approaches, must have the same stance. He's plastered a fishy smile on his face. It's certainly good to meet you. I must admit, I'm not sure whether to call you Fräulein or Colonel. I've heard it all, sir. My hands and feet run red with the blood of my enemies. Frau or Colonel, as you prefer. Well, that cuts to the chase.
Oh.
The man's expression stiffens. Let's finish up introductions. I'm Colonel Virginia Calandro. I've been dispatched from the Royal ILDOA Army as a military observer.
I'm Lieutenant Colonel Tanya von Degorchav.
Nominally, I'm the deputy commander of the Lurgen Kampfgruppe, directly under the general staff, but I'd appreciate it if you remember that in reality, I'm the commander of the Salamander Kampfgruppe. The first step in labeling people is experience and rank. Tanya feels a personal fondness for Colonel Calandro from that initial amiable moment where both of those criteria came into play. To be blunt, it's good business, I think. Anyone showing up here can't be too inept. I've heard of you and your alias White Silver from Colonel von Lurgen. He told me you were a living recipient of the Silver Wings Assault Badge, a named and a true soldier, so I must say I'm a bit surprised by your appearance. I profit by being small, less surface area that can be hit. Oh, that'll make things rough for me. Maybe I'll walk through the battlefield in a half crouch. I hope you won't find this question rude, but what kind of combat experience do you have? I trained with the Alpine Regiment, but this is the first time I'm participating in such a large operation, Colonel. It must be quite different from one or two little covert ops. He's an officer flexible enough to banter, but handy enough to be thrown onto the forwardmost line in a pinch. Phew, Tanya thinks as she feels the burden on her shoulders lightening. It's much easier to handle a capable officer than an inept one. Of course, given that her each and every move is being watched now, there's no time to relax, but still. Oh, don't be modest. You're a specialist in delicate situations. If I may be so presumptuous, I think they made a fine choice in sending you. And thanks to that, I've been flung all the way onto the Eastern Front. Ah yes. Tanya finds herself sympathizing with a bitter grin. As someone who was sent to the front lines because she does such a good job, she can relate to that gripe. Here you are on the forwardmost line. On behalf of the Empire, I humbly welcome you. Thanks. I'll mainly just be watching and listening. If you could show me things as they are, that would be perfect. Understood. As a host, I hardly meet the minimum requirements, but I'll do what I can, even if it's not much. I appreciate it. May 2nd, Unified Year 1927, Eastern Front, Imperial Army Camp. Colonel von Degorchav, we've made contact with the enemy. At first Lieutenant Serabryakhov's announcement, Tanya jerks out of her pleasant doze. Just like Pavlov's dog. The sound of the word enemy is enough to banish her light sleep. She swallows her sigh and acknowledges with a shout, "I'll be there right away." Parting with her bed and beloved sleep, Tanya resolutely sprints for headquarters and is already holding back sighs by the time she's looking over the brief. Enemy contact, huh? So it's sooner than the general staff anticipated. It's rough to suppress her rage and condemnation. The enemy has advanced too quickly. Not faster than expected, but faster than we could have ever imagined. I don't want to think that the general staff's understanding of the situation disagrees so much with ours on the ground that they're optimistically assuming we'll find the kind of environment they hope for. Does this mean the enemy is more capable than the general staff estimated? More powerful? Either way, it's not a favorable development for Tanya. Regardless of how things are done in sports, this is war. Overwhelming a weaker enemy is far more practical and profitable than competing against a stronger one. I guess all we can do is cry over our helplessness. We can't even choose the opponents we want. Tanya adjusts the priority of things in her mind. Reflecting and assuming are both luxuries now. If she doesn't first eliminate the threat facing her, the future of free thought is in danger. Major Weiss, let's have the details. A few moments ago, Captain Ahrens encountered a group of enemy tanks. We took no losses. 5 enemy tanks were destroyed. However, since infantry showed up as reinforcements, he's decided to withdraw. So, the report came in late? That's unusual for Captain Ahrens. Was the radio out of order? There seems to have been a light rain. Rain isn't kind to radio waves. That said, I don't really want to believe that a mere drizzle could cause that much of an issue. Are we just having critically bad luck? What's worse is that we can't rule out the possibility of mechanical failure. The precision of the precision machinery we're using to the fullest on the Eastern Front can't be counted on. It's hardly surprising, given that by the time we're employing our equipment to the fullest on the Eastern Front, we're already using them in a way that was unexpected, since they were made for operating in our homeland. It really is irritating. A TSK slips out. "Colonel Calandro's arrived, ma'am." What switches her mind's gears is the shout from the person outside on guard duty. When it rains, it pours. Tanya leaps to her feet as etiquette demands and snaps off a textbook salute. "Sir." "Thanks, Colonel." It's been ages since an officer superior to her has entered the command post during combat. It doesn't make things easy. But whining that this is exactly why Tanya told Colonel von Lergen she was against this won't help now. "Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. The General Staff has given us orders for how to handle this." He seems to understand that she means not to worry about it. With a bob of his head, he thanks her and apologizes again. "Can you tell me what's going on?" "I just got here, too. Let's have the duty officer, Major Weiss, explain things." She tells Weiss to fill them in, and he nods his understanding before beginning to speak. The advanced armored unit made contact. They ran into enemy tanks backed by infantry, so our tanks have begun their retreat. We're about to have 1st Lieutenant Tosban's infantry unit go out to meet them. Where did they make contact? It's this area on the grid. Specifically, I think around here. Weiss pointed to a location on the map. Please take a look, in response to Calandro's question. Tanya has climbed up on a chair to look at the map with them, and the topography makes her want to click her tongue in frustration. When she glances at Calandro, she sees that he seems to have a good understanding of the situation. "It's awfully near that residential area, isn't it, Colonel?" "Yes, that's a pain." Unfortunately, the map's accuracy seems only up to par for civilian purposes and had probably been appropriated for military use, but it's still got the job done of providing a basic picture. That spot is indeed a residential area. No, technically, it's probably more of a town or village. But in any case, the amount of cover there would make it very different from a field battle. It may be presumptuous of me, but may I ask a question? How does the Imperial Army generally handle situations like this? What a pointed inquiry. Tanya grins wanly at Calandro. For better or worse, armies love manuals. Operating in residential areas is a stiff military and legal challenge, so as a military observer, trying to learn from the seasoned Imperial Army is the correct attitude for the ILDOAN colonel to take. If there's any issue with it, I suppose it's that she has to tell him that no such handy thing exists in this world. As you know, residential areas are headache-inducing. Embarrassingly, though the home country must be actively deciding standard operating procedures, they haven't been yet established. Is that true? Yes, affirms Tanya. I keep thinking how much easier things would be if they were. Tanya is lamenting this fact from the bottom of her heart. If there was a by-the-book way of doing things, she could simply follow that and avoid a lot of responsibility. All the officers must feel the same. If you had a standard policy, then you could avoid hairy issues by simply applying the rules set out by the higher-ups. Although when he says that to her so bluntly like that, she has to wince. The way you explain it is a bit extreme, but in general you're right. The practical issue now is that when a residential area is in our way, we're forced to proceed at a snail's pace. Due to the balancing act with the Land War Convention, the Empire hasn't seriously considered research on urban war. That's only to be expected. Since the Federation isn't party to any of the international treaties, they should have thought about it, given the possibility of an attack. But since the Imperial Army is specialized in interior line strategy, you could say a weakness has been exposed. So, even veterans with plenty of experience aren't sure what to do. I beg your pardon, Colonel, but it's the opposite. The opposite, you say? Contrary to Calandro's puzzled look, her subordinates are nodding. They understand quite well what Tanya means. There's some difficulty in claiming it as a civilized opinion, but there are hardly any places less suited to war than a residential area. There are just too many obstacles to have any real fondness for it. Anyone who has had a bitter experience in a residential area feels the same. She glances around the room, and there happen to even be people with experience being injured in a similar battle. Even the veteran lineup of the 203rd Aerial Mage Battalion's officers is a good sample of the loathing. Am I wrong, Major Weiss? This conversation is liable to make my old wound act up. I do wish you'd spare me, her subordinate, who had been shot in the fight against the Republic, said with a wry grin. Even a veteran like him is no exception to the rule that it's virtually impossible to keep a lookout in all directions in a residential area. Flying also requires keeping a 360-degree watch, but the only obstacles in the sky are clouds. Honestly, it's far harder to search for enemies in places where people live. And in an urban environment, well, you can call it a concrete jungle. It would be so much easier if we could just go around it. Faced with Tanya's and the other size, Calandro seems to get the idea and winces. Experience points, Something like that. Well, let me ask you more on that later. For right now, I'll stay out of your way while you take command. Thank you. She extends her gratitude for his consideration and then speaks in a purposely normal tone. So, Major Weiss. Yes, I know. Are we heading out? His reply is immediate. This is what an outstanding vice commander should be like. That's right. Tanya smiles in satisfaction. She's glad she can save time by omitting the explanation. Still, although it's contradictory to say so, explaining things is her duty. It makes sense, since a superior must see that everyone is aware of their intentions to the extent possible. Work among professionals who aren't overly reliant on one another entails a sturdy foundation of concise, accurate communication and confirmations. Considering the less-than-stellar wireless performance we're getting, let's move HQ up. We can meet with Captain Ahrens and get a handle on the situation. Understood. He responds immediately to the order. It's so reassuring to feel like you're able to trust someone enough to let them handle things. I suppose you can say having to do checks is extra work. Maybe it's rude to call it extra work. Tanya reflects in her head as she speaks to the military observer beside her. It's as you've heard, Colonel. What would you like to do? Hold on, are you trying to tell me to lie low because it's dangerous? I wouldn't say that, but neither can I make light of the risks. Of course, I don't want headquarters to be attacked either, but this close to the front lines, literal encounter battles are to be expected. Strafe fire or harassment from a hidden sniper. Near the front lines, even if it's a non-combat area or not technically considered part of the front, safety is never assured. Claiming an area is 100% safe is a scam. And Tanya is no scammer. She's a civilized individual of integrity armed with modern reason, and an awareness of norms. We've minimized said risks. But Tanya drives her point home. In addition to compliance, their public image has to be considered. Naturally, the most definitely important factor is the law. All that said, neither can she discount how carefully everything has been checked and rechecked to make sure there are no ethical issues. Whether for self-protection inside the organization or signaling in society, preventing problems related to the initial handling of these things is paramount. We cannot guarantee that the Federation will immediately recognize you as a military observer from the Royal ILDOA Army and hold back in their attacks. I understand your concern, but I'm not sure I approve of being treated like an overprotected child. I'd appreciate it if you'd let me watch. Understood, Tanya says with a reluctant nod. Respectfully, we have nothing to hide from our ally. If you insist, then please observe to your heart's content. I realize I'm asking a lot, Colonel. She'd like to say, then maybe watch yourself. Given the strict orders she has from Colonel von Lergen and the General Staff, she's so worried something might happen to him that the comment threatens to pop out of her throat. But contrary to what's inside, Tanya's mouth forms a polite reply. No, it's not so much at all. Perhaps it's because she's such a sociable animal of politics? Lieutenant, Colonel Tanya von de Geerschaf is fully capable of employing respectful flattery with an ingratiating smile. This is an honor of a role entrusted to me by the General Staff. I've been told to grant your every wish, so don't hesitate. I'm at your service. Then about that. Mentioning the risks is just a part of my duty, so I hope you understand. I respect your obligations, Colonel. With that in mind, I'd like to do this of my own accord. Calandro declares his volition before all the staff at HQ. If he's coming along despite Tanya's serious reluctance and warnings, then all that's left to do is arrange an escort. Now, no matter what happens, her duties have been perfectly fulfilled. Even if he gets shot and killed, she'll be able to make some excuse to the General Staff. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but it's important to anticipate the possibility. If I must, Tanya maintains an outwardly courteous attitude and says to her adjutant in a slightly put-out way, "Be Colonel Calandro's guide." Yes, ma'am. Regardless of how Serebryakov is at entertaining, she makes a great shield as an escort. Tanya is happy to be able to trust her to protect him in the case that anything should go wrong. And, by assigning her to guide him, she can get him out of HQ for a moment. Perfect. Oh, Colonel, one thing. Yes, what is it? If you don't mind, after we move, I'd like to watch your meeting about how to handle the situation. For a moment, Tanya thinks in silence. Honestly, she wants to refuse. Whose idea of a good time includes holding a sales meeting in front of an executive from a client company? But Tanya's position prevents her from saying mean outright to the military observer. Whoever said wretched is the lot of the government official is worth taking seriously. If that's what you wish, then of course. But though she chooses her words carefully, she is to add, I'm terribly sorry, but may I ask for your express consideration during the action? What specifically? Of course, I want to cooperate as much as I can. Thank you. Tanya bows and, with full realization that she's being offensive, makes her request in detail. During the operation, I want to make commanding my highest priority, so can we temporarily disregard your superior position, the fact that there's a full colonel present? Basically, this is an impudent request for permission to make Calandro an ornament, but she simply has to get him to agree to it. Educating a superior while simultaneously fighting a war is more than Tanya can handle. War is a problem you must always tackle with every last bit of your strength. Cutting corners could lead to problems that not only lower society's estimation of you, but directly affect your assets and very life. Of course, consider me a bystander. Thank you. Suppressing her relief, Tanya bows deeply. It's really so helpful that he understands. Of course, I still probably won't be able to ignore him completely. This'll be hard. Even if she thinks that, though, she can't say it aloud. It'll be a struggle to perform as usual under the gaze of an important visitor, but it is what it is. When it comes to doing it, it must simply be done. Thus, Burdened with these slight worries, Tanya and the principal commanders of the Kampfgruppe begin moving to the front line. They may be experiencing a bit of poor weather, but there's probably no one else on the road besides the Kampfgruppe's vanguard. They're blessed with relatively good ground conditions. More than anything, she appreciates that the horses, vehicles, and people can travel without much issue. Tanya and the others meet up with Captain Ahrens's armored troops without a hitch. It's going about as well as anyone would expect, I suppose. Troops rush about receiving supplies or delivering them, getting plastered in mud as they do so. On the forwardmost line, they have no choice but to prioritize function over form. Provisional HQ is constructed promptly, but it does only consist of a single tent. Still, Tanya and the others are used to that by now. To Calandro, who looks around, fascinated, there must be something novel about it, but it'll feel normal soon enough. The place grandly called a meeting room is a basic, rough collection of folding chairs, a wireless kit, and maps. That said, even with the minimal equipment, their work can still be done. Gentlemen, it's as you've heard. Let's get a handle on the situation. In this space appropriate for an operation briefing, if only superficially, Tanya kicks off the discussion. Captain Ahrens, what's your status? After encountering the enemy armored unit, you mean? It was a mess. Like usual, then? Yes, ma'am. The expert nodded with a wince. It's doubtful you'd be able to give a quick explanation of the situation if you lack the skill to grasp it. Before long, enemy infantry started showing up. Since the enemy was entering a residential area, we decided that to avoid a battle in the streets, we should retreat temporarily. Tanya comprehends the situation and finds it irritating. If there are enemy troops in a residential area, then this will involve the chore of pseudo-urban warfare, where we conduct a sweep block by block. The Kampfgruppe has the ability to do that if nothing else. Sending in the golden duo of the Mage Battalion and infantry would make it possible to clear those areas. The issue is that would take too long. Since we aren't in a position to creep up around the enemy base and attack, we have to pay close attention to time. It happens while she's thinking about what to do. The Federation troops entered a residential area? Calandro asks a question.
Colonel Calandro.
He may be a bystander, but apparently he's inquisitive, too. Tanya thinks as she suppresses the urge to pull a sour face and replies politely. Can I help you with something? If they enter a residential area, that makes it a fight in the streets. Does that mean the Federation soldiers are fine with that? Replying to his question would slow down the functioning of HQ. Really, she'd like to scream, "You're in the way," and kick him out, but violence won't be tolerated in this instance. This is exactly why I told Colonel von Lergen that accepting a full bird colonel as an observer would be difficult for a Kampfgruppe with a lieutenant colonel as its superior officer. But frustratingly, headache-inducingly, even sighing would be a breach of etiquette in this situation. I guess I have no choice. Tanya resigns herself and throws it at a subordinate. Captain Ahrens, answer the colonel's question. She shoots him a look that says, "You know what I mean," and he's well trained. He seems to have grasped her intentions. Straightening up, a model officer, he begins explaining the situation in an expository tone. Yes, ma'am. A large-scale unit of enemy infantry has holed up in a residential area. As you pointed out, sir, they may be intending to resist from inside the buildings. In a residential area? How did you confirm that? After the armored troops clashed, it was mainly the infantry who checked out the situation. The mages who flew in as support have also been observing. I see. So the Imperial Army is using aerial mages for search missions. Apologies to Calandro, who's murmuring something or other, but Tanya can't have this level of Q&A interrupting the flow of her meeting. We can't fight a war like this. Colonel, may I continue? Yes, sorry. Please do. Thank you. She responds politely, but internally she's hurling protests by the dozens. An officer ranking above me, and from a country that even superficially is supposed to be our ally. How am I supposed to work like this? I'm going to have to build a general staff for tons of entertainment costs. Troops, it's as Captain Ahrens said. If the Federation soldiers are holed up in a residential area, orthodox methods will take too long. Then please leave it up to the artillery. Exactly. Now's your time to shine. There's the issue of how much ammunition to conserve. Shall we go all out? Tanya nods at Captain Maybert that she's fine with that. She's really just delighted that her artillery maniac has learned to worry about how many shells are left. If it's an encounter battle, wouldn't this be a good time to use our mobile artillery? The reason we've been supplied with something so expensive as self-propelled guns is that the Imperial Army's General Staff values mobility in the extreme. Our ammo concerns are unavoidable and frightening, but the obvious benefit is that problem areas can be leveled with artillery shells. We can use mages as forward observers, guide the guns, and eliminate the points of enemy resistance. Get support from Lieutenants Tospan and Grants and their Mage Infantry composite unit for suppression as necessary. Please wait a moment. Yes, Colonel Calandro? What is it? The flow of things is once again interrupted. The mental cost of politely swallowing the comment again is no joke. I definitely need to draw up that plus the opportunity cost and invoice the General Staff for the full amount. All of it. I'm not leaving out a single bidison. If I don't invoice for everything within my right to invoice for, including supplemental compensation for my subordinates who have to do everything with me, I'll be a disgrace. You're calling in artillery fire? On a residential area? Yes, that's right. Seriously?
Huh?
What about, sir? Her blank expression is genuine. If the enemy is in an obnoxious spot and we have artillery, why should my seriousness about attacking with artillery come into question?
No.
She shelves that question. Calandro is not from the Imperial Army. Perspectives often vary between insiders and outsiders. The reason must be a difference in organizational culture. To suddenly order an artillery barrage on a residential area in an encounter battle is worrisome. With all due respect, this decision takes into account what we've learned in battle. It seems like both sides were in the processes of advancing, and that's why we ended up in an encounter battle, so this will be particularly effective, as they haven't fortified their position yet. I'd like to ask one thing just for reference. Are you actually being serious, Colonel? Yes. She nods. Is combat doctrine that different in the Royal Ildoan Army? Still having no idea what the questionable part of this is, she doesn't really enjoy getting a taste of that vague middle management position misery that involves explaining your intentions to a superior in front of your subordinates. We're carrying this out with firm resolve. If you'll forgive me for speaking according to my experience, these sorts of encounter battles are not uncommon on the Eastern Front, and I determine this to be an appropriate measure. If there's anything to be worried about, it's time. Using even a second of it on this discussion is already a huge waste. The stress of wondering if the enemy is building up a position as they speak can't be good for my mental health. Surely it must be against the law of war, though. What? Excuse me, but are you having some kind of wild misunderstanding? Misunderstanding? What exactly do you think the law of war is? International norms that must absolutely be adhered to. Forgive the abrupt question, but have you ever learned them? This isn't a conversation she wants to have in front of her subordinates, but she replies because she has no choice. You're asking if I've studied the law of war? It's only natural, but I consider myself to have thorough knowledge of the standard legal curriculum. Really? Because it sure doesn't seem like you understand. When Calandro gives Tanya a doubtful look, she glares right back. I've completed the standard law courses at both the Imperial Academy and the General Staff program at the War College. While at school, I also did research on interpretations in practice. It's too bad for Colonel Calandro, but to Tanya, laws are the most important system of norms. Things that aren't written down might not exist, but only monkeys make light of laws that have been put in writing. I'll be frank, Colonel von de Geerchaff. Isn't attacking an area presumably inhabited by civilians a clear violation? Oh, I see.
Colonel.
That's what you're on about. You're referring to the rule prohibiting combat in residential areas? Generally speaking, I think it's correct of you to question whether it conflicts with the rules of engagement. Tanya nods as if to say she couldn't agree more. But it's actually quite simple to unravel this misunderstanding. On the Eastern Front, however, don't worry, Colonel Calandro. All manner of issues pertaining to these laws has been dealt with. Dealt with?
What are you talking about?
Though she's amused that the day would come that she's having a debate about legal interpretation in a temporary field HQ like this, she doesn't forget that the clock is ticking. Unfortunately, given that they're fighting a war, this sort of extravagant time usage should probably be curtailed. Thus, Tanya gives a concise conclusion. The law of war doesn't apply to this scenario. It's not applicable? Don't be ridiculous. Exceptions don't dash. They don't exist, true. Tanya nods with that matter-of-fact observation. Because you get burned if legal interpretation isn't done correctly, she's given this close consideration. Laws are not for breaking, they're for dodging. Fighting a law head-on means an emergency evacuation in the very end. Strictly speaking, the Federation is not party to several of the international treaties and is therefore not afforded their protection. It's a boss's duty to show their subordinates that there are no legal issues with their actions. Neither civil nor military law supports the ordering of illegal actions. If something is gray, you can still call it white, even if it's a stretch. But black is always black. Being in the black is permissible, but when we're talking about the laws of modern society, being a black sheep is no good. As a civilized individual, it's something I want to avoid. You're sure about that? Yes, and cities on both sides have already become battlegrounds. Wait a moment, Colonel von de Geerchaff. On both sides. Our side cities have taken a pounding during Federation offensives. I'm hard-pressed to call it civilized, but it's reality. Tanya continues, implying that she hopes to gain his understanding. Either way, legal has already given their stamp of approval to shelling cities, and as a combat unit, we merely follow Central's legal interpretations. Will that do? That's quite edifying, Colonel von de Geerchaff. Yes, I thought we would find a legal way to avoid problems. But I never thought all manner of barbarism would be justified with the simple words the treaties don't apply. It's quite a shock. She smiles wryly and continues. Either way, there aren't very many armies as law-abiding as ours, and that goes for both international laws and military regulations. And I'm also proud to say my subordinates are doing a great job. You call that law-abiding? Even if only nominally, the Kampfgruppe comes directly under the General Staff. It probably also helps that its core unit is an aerial mage battalion. Since aerial mage battalions operate over a large area, officers are given a thorough legal education. You can't be fighting a war without a legal defense. That's obvious, is what she's showing him. Her simple, clear answer must have made an impression. Taking advantage of the fact that Calandro has gone silent, Tanya returns to the stalled conversation with her officers. Okay, troops, sorry for the delay, but let's get back to the matter at hand. We're going to wipe out enemy resistance. But this time, it's enough to repel them in a general way. Captain Maybert. She turns to him as she addresses him by name. I want to do this based on your proposal. You'll have aerial mages as support, but a field of rubble will be an obstacle for the rest of the troops. I hope you have a plan in mind. Yes, Colonel. My combat plan is, as you see here. He's marked several important buildings for bombardment. They're all high-rise buildings that'll give us trouble if the enemy has holed up in them. Well, in this remote residential area, those are clearly church towers, but the idea seems to be to get ahead by obliterating all of them. It's easier than destroying concrete pillboxes and probably more effective. The classic strategy?
Fine, io approve.
Nodding, she points quickly at the map to show her officers, confirming the combat plan. Doesn't need to be flashy. Just crush the enemy's gun positions and suppress them. Artillery plows and the infantry advances. Even in a residential area, that principle doesn't change. That's what unlimited war means. The plan is for Captain Maybert's artillery to strike a blow to the enemy's firepower, but we should probably consider how the rubble will block our advance. So, Tanya adds cautiously, I need the observer mages to guide the guns accurately so as little debris is created as possible. Then in terms of training level, I'd like to have Lieutenant Grantz's unit observe as opposed to Lieutenant Westman's. Your opinion makes sense, Major, but Lieutenant Tospan's unit pairs the best with Lieutenant Grantz's. Lieutenant Tospan, can you pair with Lieutenant Westman? She glances over to see Tospan's unconcerned face. But even this easygoing fellow has learned some things in the Kampfgruppe. If that's your order, we'll do our best, but at such short notice. The fact that he's able to recognize the task as difficult is commendable. The tossman who can say no is much more useful than the tossman who says yes to the impossible. He's made fine progress toward becoming a well-fitting cog in the system if he can recognize what he can't do and reports that to his superior. If you don't acknowledge these small improvements, personnel will have stunted growth. To Tanya, who is considering writing a few books about personnel development, it's a critical realization. Thinking about harmony surely makes me a peace-minded individual. Biting back a wry grin on that point, Tanya reconsiders how to handle this. Then there's only one thing to do, huh? Major Weiss, can we put your company on direct observation? No problem. Good. Then your unit's on observation. Lieutenant Westman's will be reserve firepower. Lieutenant Grantz's will be working with the infantry. Captain Aaron's, sorry, but the armored unit will also be support for the charge. All right then. She makes a quiet excuse. My unit will stand by here as reserves. If need be, I'm sure we'll go in, but we have a guest after all. Don't you dare let them break through. I have to protect Colonel Calandro, so I can't go to the front line. What a beautifully empty assertion. It would cause too many side effects or, rather, problems to use it for every little thing, but as an excuse to not go to the front line, I should appreciate it as more than adequate. That said, what if something did happen to Calandro? Tanya's future career prospects would be dark indeed. I trust you all, but just in case, I'm counting on you, Lieutenant Serebryakov. Understood. I can handle it. Good. Tanya nods, still calculating things out in her head. The problem with Calandro really is his rank more than his temperament. Getting ready to attack and into position in a war takes up a surprising amount of time and effort. Being in the right place and accomplishing the task as planned is proof of excellence in itself. Perhaps you could say it's the kind of craftsman-like job that can be pulled off only when commanders on all levels understand their role and the non-commissioned officers are displaying their leadership skills. All units are in position. Quicker than planned? Well done. Tanya replies to her adjutant after a satisfying glance at her watch. Lieutenant Tossban is requesting the use of a smoke screen before they charge. Tell him to remember the basics of trench warfare. I guess he doesn't know them. Tell him to use it as they charge. Why go out of our way to alert the enemy to our presence ahead of time? Clutching the receiver, her adjutant, who acknowledges with an understood, is the type who comprehends good communication. Tanya feels confident leaving things to her. So then, my critical task is... Tanya picks up the line phone next to her. Captain Maybert, are you ready to go? Leave it to me. We'll have those belfries ringing in no time.
Good.
I love it when church bells ring. Oh. Her subordinate sounds skeptical on the other end of the line, but Tanya confirms, of course. For whom the bell tolls, right? I'm not against it. I plan to watch through my binoculars. We'll do our best to make it worth your while. Please wait for the appointed hour. Will do. She replaces the receiver and confirms the slightly awkward time until Maybert's scheduled to move. Everyone reached their positions sooner than expected, so there's no need to hurry. Glad to see her troops displaying that arrive 5 minutes early spirit, Tanya nods and considers calling her adjutant to prepare her some coffee. Times like this, it's fine to take on that relaxed observer air. And maybe that negligence is what gets her in trouble. Colonel von de Gierchaff, may I have a word? When the actual observer enters the provisional HQ and speaks to her, Tanya fights the urge to respond with her true feelings, again, and greets him properly. Sure, Colonel. What can I do for you? Apologies, but we're about to move, so if you can make it quick, it'd be much appreciated. Of course. Let's make it quick. When he tells her to take a look at that, she turns in the direction he points. In the residential district they're about to invade, she sees... Oh, a church? It appears a church is being targeted for bombardment. I understand your concern. But, Tanya smiles. Don't worry. There's nothing wrong. Huh. Under Federation law, that's property of the state. Sadly, the Federation doesn't have the concept of church property. Wait, what are you talking about, Colonel? Calandro, staring at her blankly, must be a man of common sense. On this point, Tanya can understand his confusion quite well. A normal, civilized person can't sanely praise the rejection of personal property. The rise of Federation communism is downright terrifying, is it not? Interpreting the law of war is legal's job. The notice we were given was that, since it's virtually impossible to distinguish between private and state property in the Federation Civil Code, attacking facilities doesn't violate the dash. She looks up when he interrupts her. Was I mistaken about something? Colonel von de Geerchaff, you must be aware, but purposefully attacking religious personnel is in blatant violation of the law of war, I'm fairly certain. Yes, that's absolutely correct. Is that what you were worried about? Tanya nods as if to say that she has finally understood his concern. Calandro brims with law-abiding spirit. Alerting her to possible illegality out of a sense of duty as a good citizen is absolutely the right move. But Tanya is also a professional with a respect for the law. It's right to fear that people connected to the church might be present. But when I checked, I didn't see any special emblems. Staring back at the colonel's blank face, she says, I'm not kidding, and holds out a pair of binoculars. She surveyed around the church towers and everything she could see from their base, but didn't spot any emblems that would prohibit them from attacking. I've had several officers take a look to confirm. Since you're here, I'd appreciate if you checked as well. Do you mind? If I find something, does that mean the bombardment will be called off? Of course. I would never order my subordinates to fire knowingly on a place of worship. With your confirmation, we'll be even more sure, which is great. She's not fibbing or anything. She would genuinely appreciate his cooperation in checking the situation. With only Imperial soldier eyes on the situation, it does end up being a bit biased. Even if this person isn't neutral enough to be considered a third party, the observations of a soldier who isn't from the Empire will be terrific evidence on a report. Well, I don't actually like places of worship, so I admit that I don't not want to shell it, but still. Actually, Tanya wants to shell it quite badly. Even so, if it's protected under the law of war, then as vexing as it may be, she'll hold the guns back. Waging war out of personal feelings turns it into a conflict of beasts. Even war has a minimal number of laws, and Tanya is a stranger to the self-destructive impulses of those who would actively break the rules. Rules are not for breaking. They are for forcing your opponent to break. Laws are not for antagonizing. They are a tool to have as your ally for knocking your opponent into next week with the power of legal principles. So, you're actually going to fire on the church? It's right in the middle of the town. Yes, it could be an advantageous firing position, so we should crush it ahead of time. So, you're going to be fighting in the streets. Yes, I believe we've discussed how it isn't a legal issue in the Federation, but did you have an issue with that? No. But if your opponent doesn't know the rules, won't keep them, or for whatever reason doesn't use them, there's no reason to be considerate. Just to confirm, you're sure there are no religious personnel over there? Tanya winces at him. Are you suggesting there might be? It's a leading question, a technique used often by lawyers and public prosecutors in court. If she says no, he'll ask for proof. If she says there might be, he'll accuse her of going against the spirit of the law. The action doesn't fit the spirit, the idea, of the law. So he approaches her with a classic trap, but Tanya is confident she won't fall for his subtle scheming. Since the question is typical, the answer is also in the textbook. If you know it, you can avoid the trap. It's an excellent, accurate example of how knowledge can save your ass. Knowledge is a weapon. If you're going into a fight, you should carefully arm yourself. I have no idea what you're talking about. You're saying there are emblems there even though there aren't. Yes, Operation Never in a million years did I think that. It's the defense most recommended by seasoned lawyers from the lawsuit superpower. The trick is to neither confirm nor deny while not refusing to testify, either. Are you saying there aren't? Maintaining a blank expression and tone, Tanya replies simply. Please consider that they haven't displayed any emblems. I can't fully rule out the most extreme possibilities, but if there aren't any displayed, then we need to wonder what their motive is for not displaying them. In other words, even if there are religious personnel present, I think it's very likely Federation soldiers are garrisoned there. Either way, My troops are more important to me, so I'm of the opinion that we should eliminate the position. Oh. She politely adds one more thing. And regarding your visual confirmation, did you see any emblems? Thank you for your assistance. It's almost time to go. I guess I got caught up in that discussion. But all right, I'll take the liberty of returning to my military duties now. Watching Lieutenant Colonel von de Geerchaf go, Colonel Calandro wandered outside the command post in a daze. What he saw through the binoculars clenched in his hands was a Federation residential area somewhere between a village and a town. As he was trained to do, he had scanned the area, and when he saw all the Imperial units in position, he still had the feeling this was unacceptable. What's going on? This wasn't the Middle Ages. Invading the streets. Encirclement. Civilians would probably get caught in the crossfire. But the even more basic question was, is this what armies are for? What are the Imperial and Federation armies thinking? He seemed to recall reading in some report that attacking cities was becoming accepted as normal. But seeing it before his eyes, it was beyond his understanding. This is absolute madness. He didn't notice the Imperial officers hesitating at all. Not just de Geerchaf. Everyone was waiting for the agreed time with their barrels pointed at a residential area. Are these scenarios really just going to repeat forever? Does morality fall silent before raison d'etre? How many corpses need to be piled up for this to end? When leading an attack, commanders are compelled to be unusually tense. Everyone hopes to defeat the enemy without any losses, but obviously, wishes don't always come true. And it's only natural for Tanya to worry, since even though it's listed officially as the Lurgen Kampfgruppe, if the Salamander Kampfgruppe crumbles, it's she who will be held accountable. Is it really my job to create a combat plan with the heartfelt hope that it doesn't contain any flaws, get saddled with the baggage that is Colonel Calandro, and then earnestly cross my fingers that being X doesn't show up to get in the way? I'm truly hard-pressed to call this waiting period pleasant. Even if it seems like the one in charge is simply kicking back, the truth is that my job is to battle the stress weighing on my digestive tract. Please, Tanya thinks as she opens her mouth to speak. Damage report. Very few casualties, ma'am. How grateful she is to hear that from her adjutant, who has tabulated all the losses from each unit. Nice work. There is nothing that reduces stress so much as being told that you were worried for nothing. She heaves a relieved sigh, with a giant smile on her face. We're currently mopping up the end of the enemies and rebuilding the lines. There's no need to get every last one. Unfortunately, if we did a thorough search and pursuit, our units would be broken up. Let the runners run. Are you sure? What choice do we have? Tanya nods. Once a location is tentatively captured, a commander is wont to prioritize securing it. In order to secure a location to which they can advance and loose the next arrow from, she needs to make sure the troops will be able to move. Our mission isn't search and destroy. There's no reason units should scatter just because we have time on our hands. Her mouth is forming the word therefore when she notices with a smile that an officer she has been expecting to show up has appeared at their provisional HQ. Reporting back in, Colonel. Oh, nice work, Major. You did an excellent job guiding Captain Maybert's artillery. Lieutenant Hosband's men must not have had much rubble to trip over. Great, her vice commander answers. He's so reliable. She glances around to double-check, and seeing Colonel Calandro isn't there to overhear them, she waves for Weiss to come closer. By the way, about the church.
You don't need to worry about that.
I confirmed at my discretion during the mop-up operation. It really seems to have been empty. Tanya doesn't actually think Major Weiss would give a false report over something like this, but was it really empty? Oh, I thought I saw some movement. Open graves and the aftermath of stolen burial goods. Maybe they were raided by the communists before we arrived? It seemed as though they were sending anything of value to the rear. Makes sense. Tanya nods. The Federation troops are really not slacking on their hatred of the Imperial Army lately. That is, they don't want to leave so much as a speck of anything valuable behind for the Imperial Army to find. The malice is tangible. This is what it means to lack kindness, charity, and goodness of spirit. Sheesh, the communists are always one step ahead of us. Huh. Did we not research them enough? Their propaganda apparently says that we're on the brink of defeat. And, she continues with a smile, apparently, they're always one step ahead of us. So those Federation guys tell the truth once in a while. Good one. Wincing, she says, no, I'm serious. She's not actually averse to acknowledging how sensible they're being about this. They've struck at the truth with their propaganda. Even capitalists aren't perfect. But, at the same time, Tanya grins. Unlike the commies, who are incapable of admitting their mistakes, capitalists take failures as a given. This is the proper application of human engineering. She's had her fill of guys like being X who deem themselves perfect and unerring. The capitalist strengths are adaptability, improvement, and evolution. And in terms of should-s, the commies are definitely a step or two ahead of capitalists, including me, when it comes to having an ideal of how things should be. It wouldn't be fair to not commend them for having the courage to step up to the cliff's edge. That said, it's vexing that I have to admit how efficient their looting was. All right, let's give Colonel Calandro a tour of the demolished abandoned church and put his law-abiding heart at ease. Oh, right, we still have that pain in the ass to deal with. Major Weiss, watch what you say. You could cause an international incident.
Do excuse me?
I'm just reminded once again of the gap between the front line and the rear. Me too, Major. Seriously, though, Tanya is compelled to say with a sigh, I can't believe he thought we were going to shell a church. For real. Even I apply the international laws and standards. Exactly, thinks Tanya. At some point, before she knew it, Calandro started viewing his hosts as savages, and she doesn't like it one bit. I know plenty about laws, so I don't want to be called a barbarian. It's honestly so unfair. May 3rd, Unified Year 1927, Eastern Front, near the front line, KAMPFGRUPPE garrison. It probably sounds cool if you say a victory nap in a seized building. But actually, even just having a corner of an old building to make into a bed is such a huge upgrade in comfort. After a good night's sleep and a breakfast fit for a human, just as Tanya is thinking with a wry grin that it seems like it will be a civilized day, she gets a message from headquarters. The higher-ups just do what they want. Tanya is allowed a single sigh. Then all she can do is solemnly obey. She's simply telling the officers of the KAMPFGRUPPE gathered for a meeting that they'll be retreating. The officers of the Aerial Mage Battalion accept it relatively quickly. They must be used to the home country's absurdities. Surprisingly, it should probably be said, Captains Maybert and Ahrens and First Lieutenant Westman don't even seem terribly dissatisfied, which is quite something. So the one who reacts as expected, in a way, is First Lieutenant Tospan? Orders to retreat? If you'll excuse me, we did just suppress a residential area, but the fortification of our defensive position is going smoothly. I don't see the need to dash. In other words, I didn't mean to interrupt. This is a good opportunity. Please finish what you were saying, Lieutenant Tospan. We can defend. I don't see why we have to abandon this position. Isn't the worst case that the enemy will retake it, and we'll end up giving them time to strengthen their foothold in the area? That's a good question, Lieutenant Tospan. Tanya nods and, sparing no effort to educate a newbie, inquires about his current perception of the situation. Is that how you see things? Yes, Colonel. The conditions on the front lines aren't so bad. Aren't we strengthening our foothold despite the encounter battle with the Federation Army? My word, he makes more sense than she expected. She's pleasantly surprised to get to witness his growth. And when you count that his infantry unit performed during the suppression, she has to admit that he's capable of getting the minimum done. Which is why she puts all the necessary energy into mentoring him. That probably is how it looks from the ground. So you mean? The puzzled look on Tospan's face means there's some work to do with regards to application. He's not the kind of guy who you can give him one, and he'll get to 10 on his own. Sadly, he's also one of Tanya's officers. That said, it's a matter of course as a soldier to do the best with what you have on hand. And Tospan is making an effort in his own way. I have no complaints about assisting him as a superior officer. I do feel that I'm a little hyped up about education, even for me, but as a good citizen, that's only natural. On the other hand, Tanya can't help but point out with a wince, you can't just live in the two classic dimensions. Modern warfare is three-dimensional. Huh. When Tosban still doesn't follow, Tanya appoints an aerial mage to explain. Major Weiss, how do the lines look from the sky? They're too tangled. Maybert and Aarons both nod that they understand. They may not be magic officers, but they have been trained. Tosban's blank look must mean he requires more education. That said, even if he can't get to 10 from 1, it's too soon to fault him. For a lower-ranking officer, this is the current standard. The Peter Principle 6 was well stated. It'd be selfish of me to expect more without promoting him. From your point of view, we've got the pressure on them. Yes, ma'am. As long as, like my unit, the others are advancing, I don't see why. That's probably not mistaken, but it's also only a flat view. If you look from above, you can say the forwardmost line is in chaos. Listen, Lieutenant. She continues her explanation. The way things are now, it'll be extremely difficult to operate smoothly. For example, she gives a concrete reference. Suppose I request artillery support for your unit. Now, say that the enemy position is right in front of your nose. You don't want to accidentally get blown away, do you? Or, rather, I doubt the artillery would even agree to such a reckless order. She glances over to see the artillerymen frowning. It's not a distance we could be responsible for, as long as there wasn't an order to blow Lieutenant Tosban up along with the enemy. It happens just as Captain Maybert says those words. As if it was the sign, the sound of shell impacts echoes. If you're used to getting shot at, you recognize it even if you don't want to. It's close, and it is us being shot at. A bombardment? Someone yells, and all the officers at HQ simultaneously develop the same fear. An enemy attack. Of all the dash. The search. What is going on? Tanya nearly says when the artillery officer, Maybert, shouts, "They're behind us. It's coming from behind us." But when he says the bombardment is coming from the rear, Tanya shakes her head. It can't be. The rear has been infiltrated, and we didn't realize it until we were getting fired on. Are we really such a bunch of numbskull as that? Tanya can't accept what Maybert is saying. But on this point, Maybert is a professional artilleryman. I'm pretty sure these are our guns. We're coming under accidental friendly fire. What dash? After a moment of speechlessness, Tanya realizes he's probably right. We did get hit with our artillery's irritating calculation errors on the Rhine front, but there's another impact. And it's even closer this time. They have observers. The real barrage is coming. Thanks to Maybert's warning, Tanya understands the situation much better, and she clicks her tongue. This isn't a calculation error. It's even worse. We've been mistaken for the enemy. The base piece fires around and makes adjustments. I have experience guiding them, and I've been shot at like this before. I just never thought our own guys would be shooting at me. All units, take shelter. Shelter now, and keep an eye on the sky. Tanya knows from experience, if you can stop the observer mage, you can at least delay the firing. Shit, I guess I have no choice. She manifests an electronic countermeasure with the Alinium Type 95's overpowering output. All the communications in the airspace are temporarily overwhelmed, and Tanya calls to the observer mage who must be out there, her murderous intentions plain to see. In the name of God, I say unto you, this is the Salamander Kampfgruppe. To the idiots firing on your own troops in Grid Square C. 39, cut it out. I possess neither the mercy nor the patience of the Lord. Salamander Kampfgruppe? What's your call sign?
Dumbass.
You've got a lot of nerve after firing on us, Tanya rages. She truly cannot stand this. Make them stop right now. Listen. She needs her urge to kill into her words and launches her fury at the flying freeloader. Salamander 01 to Observer Mage. Where are you flying, you absolute waste of air? With not so much as a peep in reply, I suppose I can't even expect to solve this with words. As my anger at those insufferable amateurs continues to build, I resign myself to the fact that Tanya may have to shoot down someone on her own side. Anyone who shoots at me, regardless of nationality or organization, is an enemy. The logic that my enemy is every idiot who fires on me is violent but not wrong. The identification signal is ready. Send the flare up, then hurry. Her adjutant's rapid efforts are truly the work of a pro. Teach those amateurs what's what. She gives the order. If they don't acknowledge the stream of smoke pouring from the signal flare, then she'll just have to retaliate. There. Did you see it? I see it, but I'm not saying it again. Cease your observed fire. If you don't, I don't care what your IFF says. I am treating you as enemies and counterattacking. WHY, is your unit over there? You think we're the enemy in disguise? Fine. Just try firing for effect on the Salamander Kampfgruppe. The Aerial Mage Battalion will bring its full force to bear in an anti-artillery assault. I'm confident we could overrun a division of artillery. The Imperial Army's batteries are relatively weak, so I can obliterate them in one shot. What a depressing thing to be so confident about. Do I need to teach you guys that my score on the Rhine isn't just a number? Tanya's tone, filled with fury and loathing from the pit of her stomach, is meant to show them she is serious. She doesn't want to attack troops on her own side. But the plank of Carneades exists in the field of law, too. I have the right to defend my plank, so I don't drown. Crushing the artillery in order to at least protect Mr. ILDOA from these fools trying to weaken my shield, the Salamander Kampfgruppe, is equivalent to emergency evacuation. Their reaction is slow, so Tanya screams in irritation. Battalion, be ready to sortie in response. If they fire, treat them as the enemy.
Erst, Colonel.
There is only one criterion by which friend and foe can be distinguished on the front lines, whether they shoot at you or not. That's it. You can't change that core truth by quibbling about IFF, identification signals, what badges people are wearing, or anything else. If you fire on us, we'll take care of you the way we deal with Federation artillery units. Give me whoever's in charge over there. Apologize. If you can't do that, then we're fighting to the death. Tanya doesn't even try to hide her annoyance. Just then, she notices her encoded wireless receiver screaming. HHQ to Salamander CP, come in, it's urgent. Come in, it's urgent. Salamander 01 to HQ, please explain. I guess it's fine, since it's not on an open channel. It was a misidentification. The observer mage didn't get enough training. But hearing the word misidentification, Tanya explodes. I want your excuses officially on paper at a later date. How are we supposed to keep morale up when we're under observed fire from our own artillery? It was the observer mage's mistake, because the fighting is so chaotic. Don't they even know standard procedure? What do we even have identification signals and communication ciphers for? Very sorry. I'll have him write a formal apology. Oh, the bureaucratic reply. Great. Send one copy to the general staff, and one here. You'll be officially censured afterward. Tanya slams down the receiver and takes one deep breath before exploding again. These fucking amateurs. What do they think war is? The lives of Imperial soldiers are on the line. Take this seriously. No confirmation, are you kidding me? This is people's lives. There's no recovering or taking them back. Under no circumstances will I tolerate a casually mistaken bombardment. This is a major incident that put people's lives in danger. What are they thinking? Tanya is shocked at this disaster brought about by a lack of professionalism.
Shit.
Why can't our observer mages tell our own troops from the enemy? What are they even observing? I can understand being fired on by the enemy.
We can just fire back.
That's only fair. Being fired on by your own artillery is not fair. I can even accept an accident due to gun trouble or whatnot during a rolling barrage. Just because a shelling is scheduled doesn't mean the trajectories can be calculated with 100% accuracy. Give me a casualty report. No serious losses. Just a few shells fell on our defensive position. There won't be any notable casualties. Major Weiss responds promptly, and Tanya has to ask back. What? You're sure? Yes, Colonel. Her vice commander wouldn't give her an unconfirmed report. Knowing that, she understands that he's being serious. I'm really glad to hear that. Ha! She sighs in relief. Suffering casualties over something like this would be despairingly absurd. The fact that they were fired on makes her furious, but the news that they haven't incurred losses is a hopeful enough reality to cool her raging head. Just to confirm, no damage to tanks or guns?
No, ma'am.
If necessary, we're ready to fire against the artillery. Ha ha ha, right now I'm thrilled that it doesn't seem to be necessary. The command post is relaxing before her eyes, a warmth returning to the atmosphere. No damage is truly the blessing in this curse. Sheesh, thinks Tanya, but her troubles don't end there.
Excuse-me, Colonel. Colonel Calandro?
I was worried there would be an international incident if you were killed in friendly fire. Very glad to see you're safe. Calandro pops in, looking fit as a fiddle. Yes, thankfully I'm fine. Your artillery units are surprisingly sloppy. And thanks to that, we survived. I never imagined the day would come that I'd be delighted at their sloppiness. Of course, maybe it's because they're sloppy that we were fired on in the first place.
Ah.
The stupid ones get mocked for being stupid. It's a natural principle. Still, I admire your unit. Fearing actual firing for effect, you were taking shelter, but the efficiency with which it was carried out. Your defense against artillery fire is impressive. It seems you've trained your men quite well. You're going to make me blush. It's just that I've been in many an artillery battle on the Rhine front. Maybe it's impossible for me to comprehend, since I haven't experienced that terror myself. It brings the importance of experience into sharp relief. Yes, my adjutant, vice commander, and I have a wealth of that. She brags slightly that they're elites who have been through hard times. Now then, I'm sure you know why I've come. Do you mind explaining what happened? Certainly. When Calandro expresses interest, Tanya laments to him. To put it plainly, as you've gathered, we've been fired on by our own artillery. The cause was the observer mage mistaking us for Federation troops. Mistaking? Wow. Fog of war is right, huh? Truly. But luckily, we managed across the board to avoid getting hit. Tanya comments that it was the blessing in this curse, but Calandro eyes her with suspicion. That's what I'm wondering about, Colonel. I'm surprised you were able to stop them before they fired for effect. How in the world did you do it? Huh? I called them up, gave them the cipher, and told them to cease fire. Which is a feat of coordination indeed. So, how did you pull it off? Regardless of the theory, the practical details elude me. For future reference, it would be great if you could tell me. We're risking our lives, you know. It's just the case that all our safety mechanisms functioned. So, you can't explain the finer points? As a military observer, I'm desperate for that sort of info. I see, she says, but beneath her polite smile, Tanya sneers. It's not happening. No matter how hard he digs, she can't tell him she got them to stop by threatening them. Just try leaving that on record. Something listed in the official record becomes something that officially happened. If it got into the record that I was fired at by mistake and threatened them, it would be a stain on my CV. This is different from logic in a moment of rage. Once you have the breathing room to think about long-term preservation of the self, you need to keep up appearances. Perfect resume, perfect career, perfect future. This 3-item set must be defended with one's life. First the friend or foe identification signal, and then an appropriate conversational exchange. And the grace of God. Yes, I think that's about it. Calandro leaves the room with an "I see" and a "thank you," either because he realizes I'm busy or because he wants to observe the situation some more. Whichever it is, I'm grateful he's gone. I can't believe I have to deal with this ineptitude. The instructors who sent these idiots to the front can rot. Observer accuracy is the root of the Imperial Army's firepower. If we're getting lax with that, the future is bleak. As losses reach their limit, the quality of the replenishment is bound to drop. I know, Major Weiss. It'd be stranger to replace veterans with part-timers and expect things to function without issue as normal. Would the General Staff really cling to such stupid wishful thinking? Tanya sinks into thought for a moment. The more she regains her composure, the stranger it all seems. It's common knowledge that the Army is running short on fighting power. She can't deny that committing newbies to the front is a theoretically sound last-ditch measure. But that's not what happened. The essential point is that the Imperial Army still has some sturdy personnel left. Running low and running out are two different things. Unless the home country has mental issues, something weird is going on. It was just such a shit show. It's difficult to imagine that coming out of nowhere. I'm not citing insurance statistics, but usually an accident is preceded by a flood of previous smaller stresses. The incident this time seemed much larger than a simple mistake. So then has the quality of the troops shifted so radically? In the span of a few days? In the past few days, we had the advance order from yesterday and the sudden retreat order today. Talk about getting jerked around. Normally, this would be an indication of how much chaos the Imperial Army is facing. Normally, that is, not experiencing confusion in the field would be more of a surprise. But actually right now, things are fairly orderly. She thought maybe the idea was to purposely tangle the lines, but in any case, this is too quick of a reversal. It's easy to say, the lines are tangled, so retreat for now, but much harder to pull off. If it was so simple to retreat with the enemy right there, they would never need a rear guard. But the higher-ups mean for us to do it. And, she adds in her head, we can't say that there's zero confusion. But for a unit riddled with rookies, those guys have been operating in a relatively organized fashion up until now. This is blatantly suspect. It couldn't have happened unless someone somewhere was manipulating things. In which case, the question is the aims of the actor. A modest advance, a clash, and a tidying up of the lines. If we were going by the textbook, the order would probably be to build up a defensive position, but what are all these newbies doing on the front lines? What are they planning to do by freeing up the veterans? Recon in force? But if they want to push all the lines up, usually it would just be a Kampfgruppe like us send in. It's not something you need the whole army for, and it isn't the Imperial Army's custom to perform reconnaissance in force with a whole corps.
Colonel?
Is something wrong? Tanya suddenly realizes she's been in her own world for quite a while. It wasn't until her adjutant prodded her with a stare that she noticed. Oh no, I was just thinking. An officer's bad habit.
Anyhow.
She shakes her head, leaving her questions on a note in the back of her mind and recalling her role. She knows what she needs to do is simple. She reconfronts the situation before her. She has to present her subordinates with a plan to remediate and give them their next orders. Troops, I'm glad we didn't end up having to charge on the numbskull in that other unit. If something had happened to Colonel Calandro, it would have been an international incident, so I'm glad we escaped that too. The officers who burst out laughing, including Tospan, must all be beefing up their nerves here on the Eastern Front. Tanya finds adaptability to be a powerful force. Wow, she's compelled to marvel. All that's left is to alternate an appropriate level of tension with appropriate rest. That's the task of Tanya and the other personnel managing members of the General Staff. Human resources function perfectly when managed appropriately. Let's apology and consolatory gifts from headquarters. The requisition I leave up to she who is supposedly the most merciless among us, Lieutenant Serebryakov. What dash? I object, Colonel. But Serebryakov's sputtering protest is the minority opinion in the Kampfgruppe. All the officers must have been fleeced by her multiple times. That's our commander, always keeping a sharp eye on her subordinates. Yes, I hope that my eye for people at least is accurate, Captain Ahrens. But she's robbed more than just the magic officers. I certainly have no desire to play cards with her. There's something sad in Ahrens's eyes as he murmurs that. It must mean she's beaten him more than once. She glances around and sees that all the officers seem to agree. Captain Maybert, Lieutenant Tospan, judging from the looks on your faces, you agree with Captain Ahrens? Did you hear that, Major Weiss? Sure did. What an embarrassment. She's utterly ruthless. The duet of sighs plays out perfectly. As a light topic of conversation, it's not bad. Maybe it's a bit obnoxious, but it's important to share a sense of humor if you're going to be working together. Tanya had been worried that she couldn't connect to her subordinates in that way, so she feels like she has stumbled upon some handy material. I'm not going to tell you to have mercy on the enemy, but you might want to rethink being so heartless toward your friends and fellows.
Colonel.
Major? The laughter reviving inside Kampfgruppe HQ is a sign that precious normalcy is returning. Harmony is invaluable. All right, troops. That's that for the settlement. Make sure you tell Lieutenant Serebryakov what you'd like later. Tanya tenses up her expression to head back to the point. We need to retreat to the designated line in order to tidy up the front. Major Weiss, you're on rear guard. Captain Ahrens, you're in charging of securing our route. When she glances at them, she sees the faces of veterans who know what they're doing. So the Aerial Mage Battalion, with their mobility, will protect the rear, and the armored forces, with their breakthrough capacity, will lead the way out. Let's set ourselves up for a solid withdrawal. She makes her intentions clear. Lieutenant Hospan, operate under Captain Maybert. Assist the artillery in their retreat. Lieutenant Serebryakov, you'll go with them and escort Colonel Calandro. Understood. The fact that she can leave that to her adjutant means she has a great adjutant. You can't find support like that just anywhere. She thanks Serebryakov and doles out tasks to her other equally trustworthy officers. Okay, Major Weiss, Lieutenant Grants. We'll leave last as usual. Boy, it's a drag that managers don't get paid for overtime.
Same as always, then.
But I'm one of the lower ranking of the lowest ranks, so I'd like to apply for overtime pay. Oh, she blurts as Grants's uncharacteristic banter catches her by surprise. Right, Weiss is mid-ranking, but Grants is still lower. The privileges of being a lieutenant. Sheesh, I can't argue with that. I'll make sure we get you a form to apply for the overtime allowance. If we can get legal and general affairs to sign off, you'll get your extra pay. Your kindness brings tears to my eyes. Well, just think of it as being an aerial mage on call to scramble includes your flight, rapid response, and overtime allowances. That's just what I'd expect a manager from the homeland to say. By the point he raises his hands in surrender, Grants must have accurately comprehended the power differential between them. Very good, Tanya thinks, shooting a wry grin at Weiss. Well, I am a general staffer who came through the war college, remember? I know a thing or two about military administration. If I could, I'd get one of those refined desk polishing jobs. Weiss's face says he finds that unexpected as he murmurs, So, you wanted to work in the rear, Colonel? That's right, Major. Perhaps I'm a different animal than you. It's not as if I was hoping to be serving on the front lines. This is what it means to be truly surprised. Why do you say that? It just doesn't sound like the sort of thing an officer who has stood on pretty much every front would say. That's for sure. She groans at Weiss's comment. Even she finds her perfect attendance score odd. Maybe she needs to pay more attention to her work-life balance. How much better would it have been if that wasn't true? She smiles bitterly and nods. That said, you can't wish the world into being a certain way. Ever since I got mixed up in combat in Norden, I seem to have a connection to war. Or more like ever since I was hurled into this world by being X. Malicious beings really cause nothing but trouble for good civilized people. Maybe that's what you call fate. Fate? You have no idea how much of a relief it would be if I could shout, Neen. She sighs heavily. We're at war even as we have this ridiculous conversation. For someone with common sense like me, it's truly painful. If I may, ma'am, I agree. Oh, you understand, do you? That's great, Lieutenant Grants. Major Weiss, who pipes up with it really is, has spent as much time with Grants as Tanya has. He probably has a thing or two on his mind. I'm impressed with how far you've come. How about a simple quiz, then? A quiz? What should we have him do? Tanya asks, her interest piqued. What about having him explain the war situation?
Good.
Okay, let's get to it. Lieutenant Grants, I'll ask you just like back in the academy. Explain this order to retreat and the background to it. Yes, ma'am. Grant stiffens before speaking. It's a sort of weird way to reorganize the defense lines. It's a question of timing, Colonel. Isn't it strange to reorganize the lines while there's still combat continuing in various places, instead of after the fighting is over? You felt the same way, Yes. You thought the same thing, ma'am. I have the feeling that maybe, just maybe, the home country is planning a major counteroffensive. The way they're moving forces around feels a bit peculiar. It feels somehow deliberate. Oh, but that said, she smiles bitterly. This is just one officer's guesswork. I think that's enough chatter for now. Time to retreat. Let's do it. We'll withdraw to the rear and thank headquarters for those shells.